All right, picture the scene. It's that first warm Saturday of spring. You've finally decided this is the year. The big backyard project.
You get the vision board, right?
Oh, absolutely. You've picked out that beautiful cedar privacy fence. Maybe you've even scheduled a contractor. You are ready to go. You can practically smell the sawdust.
It's a great feeling, that momentum, finally taking ownership and improving your space.
Exactly. But then you hit a wall. And I don't mean the nice cedar wall you wanted to build.
Oh.
You hit this wall of invisible bureaucracy. And suddenly, you aren't thinking about wood stain or post caps. You're hearing terms like wetlands buffer, frost heaving, and site triangles.
And that weekend project, it's suddenly looking more like a 2-month administrative ordeal.
That is exactly what we're unpacking today. We're doing a deep dive into the surprisingly complex world of Connecticut fences. We've got a whole stack of sources here: state regs, town zoning guides, environmental reports.
And they all reveal why a simple boundary line is actually this massive collision of geology, law, and neighbor relations.
It's the perfect case study, really. You think you own the land, so you can do what you want, right?
Ah.
That's the dream.
But in Connecticut, a fence isn't just a fence. It's an intersection of environmental protection, traffic safety, and even psychological warfare with your neighbors.
Psychological warfare. Okay, we're definitely getting to that. But our mission today is to decode this whole mess. We want to understand why a permit can take anywhere from 10 to 45 days.
Right. And why you have to dig halfway to the center of the earth to set a post.
Exactly. And how to actually navigate this patchwork of rules so you don't end up with a half-finished yard and a hefty fine from the town.
It's all about knowing where the traps are before you even pick up a shovel.
So let's start with the biggest trap of all. I'm calling it the Great Permit Illusion.
Go ahead.
I was reading through the source material, specifically the Connecticut State Building Code, and I found this nugget that honestly I think would trick 90% of people.
I think I know where you're going with this.
The state code. It actually exempts fences under 7 feet from requiring a state building permit.
That's right. If you look strictly at the state level, a standard 6-foot fence is exempt.
See, if I read that, I'm thinking, fantastic, no permit needed. I'm heading straight to Home Depot. I'm loading up the truck.
And that is exactly where you get into trouble. You have to understand the difference between the state and the town.
Okay.
What you're seeing there is the state taking a sort of hands-off approach to the structure itself. They're basically saying, look, we don't need a structural engineer to inspect a 6-foot fence like we would a house.
They assume it won't fall down and kill anyone.
Pretty much, but
Yep.
that's just the state.
So where does the problem come in? Because if the state says, I'm good, surely that overrides the local guy.
You would think, but no. The problem is that Connecticut operates under what's called home rule. The state delegates land use authority to the municipalities.
Oh.
So while the state says, we don't care about the structure, the town says, we definitely care about the location, the setbacks, and the appearance.
So it creates this 2-tier system.
Precisely. And because every town creates its own zoning ordinances, you end up with this wild inconsistency. It creates a false sense of security. You can't assume that just because your cousin in the next town over didn't need a permit, you don't either.
We actually have some really stark examples of this in the notes. Let's look East Hartford versus Glastonbury. Geographically, they're right next to each other.
You could throw a rock from one to the other, but legally, they're different worlds. If you are in East Hartford, the rules are pretty involved.
How so?
They require a building permit for fences over 4 feet. And if you want to go over 6 feet, that triggers a whole special zoning permit. They want to see plans, they want fees, they want to review it all.
Okay, so East Hartford is watching you like a hawk. But then you cross the town line into Glastonbury.
And the vibe shifts completely. Glastonbury suggests a 2-foot setback from the property line, which is good practice anyway. But for a standard fence up to 6 feet, they generally don't require a building permit, much more lenient.
That is wild to me.
Yeah.
You could literally live on the border, and your neighbor across the street has a completely different set of hoops to jump through.
That's the reality of the patchwork system. And the dangerous part is relying on, anecdotal evidence. We see this all the time. Someone asks on a neighborhood Facebook group, do I need a permit?
And someone replies, no, I built mine last year and nobody cared.
Exactly. But that person might live 3 streets over, which puts them in a different zoning district. Or maybe they just got lucky and didn't get caught.
Right. Or the regulations changed last month.
You got it. The takeaway here is that your neighbor's experience is not legal advice. You have to verify your specific address with your specific zoning officer.
Okay, so let's assume we've navigated the bureaucracy, we've checked the town rules, we know we need a permit, now we have to actually put the thing in the ground. And this is where we run into the physics of it all. The source material keeps mentioning the 42-inch rule.
This is the geology part of the equation, and it's pretty unique to our climate here in the Northeast. You can't just dig a shallow hole, drop a post in, and pour some concrete. You have to go deep.
42 inches. That's 3.5 feet deep. I mean, for a fence post, that feels excessive. That is a lot of digging. Why are we going that deep?
It all comes down to the frost line. In the winter, the ground freezes to a certain depth. The water in the soil turns to ice. And, basic science, when water freezes, it expands.
Right.
Now, imagine your fence post is sitting in that frozen zone. The soil freezes, expands, and it actually grips the rough surface of the concrete footing.
It grabs onto it.
It does. It's a phenomenon called ad freezing. It literally grabs the post, and as that ice expands, it pushes the post upward.
That's what they call heaving.
Exactly. And it creates a tremendous amount of upward force. We're talking enough force to lift a deck, let alone a fence post. If you don't dig deep enough, by February, your fence line looks like a roller coaster.
The posts pop up, the rails twist.
The gates won't latch anymore. It's a mess.
So the 42 inches isn't just a random number picked by a bureaucrat.
No, it's calculated based on historical weather data. Generally, the frost in Connecticut doesn't reach below 42 inches. So by digging that deep, you are anchoring the bottom of your post in stable, unfrozen earth. The frost can do whatever it wants above that footing, but the base stays put.
It's the anchor.
It is. But, and here is where it impacts your schedule, doing it right takes time. You're pouring a lot of concrete into a deep hole. The sources are clear that you can't just backfill the dirt immediately.
Why not? If the post is straight, just bury it and move on.
Yeah.
I want to get this done.
It's chemistry. Concrete needs time to cure. It's a chemical reaction called hydration that generates heat and hardens the mix. If you dump heavy dirt on it while it's still green or soft,
You could knock it crooked.
you knock the post out of plumb before it's locked in, and then you have a crooked fence forever. You need to wait at least 24 to 48 hours for that initial cure.
So practically speaking, your yard is going to look like a construction site for a few days longer than you expected. You've got these open craters everywhere.
Yellow caution tape. And that's assuming the weather cooperates. If it rains and those holes fill with water, now you're pumping them out. If you hit a granite ledge at 30 inches, now you're renting a jackhammer.
It's almost never a simple weekend job if you're doing it to code.
Very rarely.
Speaking of things that stretch the timeline, let's talk about the invisible lines. Not property lines, but another line that can completely derail a project. The wetlands buffer.
Ah, yes. The Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agencies. This is the sleeping giant of Connecticut home improvement.
Because when I hear wetlands, I think of a swamp. Cattails, standing water. I look at my backyard, it's dry grass. I assume I'm safe.
But you don't actually have to be in the water to trigger this review, and that is the source of so much frustration for homeowners.
How does that work?
The jurisdiction of these agencies extends into what's called the Upland Review Area. Think of it as a buffer zone. Depending on your town, if your fence is within 75, 100, or even 150 feet of a watercourse or wetland, you are in their territory.
150 feet. That's half a football field. You could be 3 houses down from a stream and still get flagged.
Absolutely. You might not even be able to see the stream from your yard, but if the GIS map says you're in the buffer, you have to apply for a wetlands permit before you can even think about a building permit.
But play devil's advocate for me here. If I'm just putting the fence on dry land, how does that hurt the stream 100 feet away? It feels like overreach.
It can feel that way, but there are 2 main reasons. First is drainage. A solid fence can act like a dam, changing how rainwater flows and maybe causing erosion. But the second reason is the one that really trips people up: wildlife migration.
That leads to one of the most fascinating details I found. The critter gap?
The critter gap, yes. A very common condition of approval in wetlands areas.
Tell me about this, because to the average homeowner, a gap at the bottom of a fence sounds like a defect. I'm building this fence to keep my dog in. Why are you making me leave a hole?
It's a valid frustration, but from the ecological perspective, it's about habitat connectivity. If everyone builds solid fences right down to the dirt, we chop the ecosystem into these tiny, isolated boxes.
Right.
Amphibians, turtles, small mammals, they need to move to find mates and food. If they can't move, the populations become genetically isolated and they die out.
So the wetlands agency says, okay, you can have your fence, but it has to float.
Exactly. They will often mandate a 6-inch gap between the bottom of the fence and the ground. It lets the salamanders and box turtles pass underneath.
I can see the ecological argument, but I can also hear the listeners with beagles groaning. That 6-inch gap is an escape hatch.
It is, and that's where negotiation comes in. But beyond the design, just think about the timeline. A zoning permit might take 10 days. A wetlands review.
This blows the schedule up, I'm guessing.
Completely. These agencies are usually volunteers. They might only meet once a month, so if you miss the deadline for the agenda,
You wait another month.
it's another month. And they might want a site walk where they all come out and look at the property.
Mm.
So now that 15-day timeline pushes to 30, maybe 45 days.
All for a 6-inch gap for a turtle.
It sounds minor, but for the homeowner who wants their fence up before the Memorial Day barbecue, it's a disaster if they didn't account for it.
So we've got bureaucracy, geology, ecology. Now, let's get to the drama,
It's a sociology.
the human element.
We are talking about spite fences. I love that this is an actual legal term in Connecticut. It sounds like something out of a sitcom.
Oh, it's very real. It's codified in the statutes,
Okay.
Chapter 823.3.
So what qualifies as a spite fence? It's not just my neighbor built an ugly fence and I hate it. All right.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Aesthetic bad taste is not illegal, unfortunately. To be legally a spite fence, it has to meet a few strict criteria. First, malice. It has to be built with malicious intent.
Second, it has to have, and this is the legal term, little useful purpose to the person who built it. And third, the primary intent has to be injuring a neighbor's enjoyment of their property blocking light, air, a view.
Let's play this out. Say I'm mad at you, so I build a 10-foot wall painted neon orange right on the property line, specifically to block your view of the sunset.
That is a textbook spite fence. The intent is the key. It serves no purpose for you other than to annoy me.
But how do you prove malice? That seems incredibly hard. I could just say, I love neon orange.
It is difficult. It usually comes down to that useful purpose test.
Yeah.
If you can prove the fence provides you with privacy or security, the court will often let it stand, even if it's ugly. But if it's excessively high or placed in a weird spot that only blocks one specific window, a judge might infer malice.
And if they do?
They can order you to tear it down or lower it.
It's fascinating that the law tries to legislate being a good neighbor.
It has to. Property rights are strong, but they aren't absolute. Your right to build ends where your intent to harm begins.
There was another specific ban mentioned that feels like a holdover from a range war barbed wire.
Yes. In residential settings, you generally can't use barbed wire on boundary lines. It's a liability nightmare and a safety hazard.
Makes sense. The sources also touched on shared fences. There's this idea that neighbors should split the cost, right? Good fences make good neighbors.
State law does encourage it. But here's the expert tip. Do not rely on a handshake.
Get it in writing.
Always. The source material is very clear on this. People move, memories fade. Write it down, who paid for what, and where it sits on the property line. Because in 5 years, you'll want that paper trail.
That brings us perfectly to the geometry of safety. Specifically on corner lots, this seems to catch a lot of people off guard.
Corner lots are notoriously tricky. You might have a big backyard, but you effectively have 2 front yards in the eyes of the zoning board.
And that triggers the site triangle.
Right. Imagine you're driving a car, you pull up to a stop sign, you look left. If the homeowner on that corner has built a 6-foot solid fence right up to the sidewalk, you can't see anything.
You're flying blind. You have to creep out into the intersection.
Exactly. It's a major safety hazard. So towns enforce strict limits in that triangular area where the streets meet to preserve those sightlines.
So even if the rest of your yard allows a 6-foot fence, that corner slice might be restricted to 3 or 4 feet.
Or it might have to be a chain link or split rail fence that you can see through. It's non-negotiable because it's a public safety issue.
Speaking of safety, we have to mention pools. The stakes are just so high.
Absolutely. The pool enclosure is a whole different level of code. It's not just zoning, it's building code. You need self-closing gates, self-latching hardware at specific heights so kids can't reach them. The inspector will measure everything down to the inch.
Okay, let's unpack this for the listener who's sitting there thinking, I just want to build a fence and now I'm terrified. We need a roadmap. How do you actually get this done?
It is manageable. You just have to follow the order of operations. Do not buy materials until you've done the homework.
Missed one.
Call the town. Don't guess. Call the zoning office and give them your specific address. Ask them everything. What are the setbacks? Is my property near a wetland? Do I need a variance?
It's simple enough. Step 2.
The survey. I cannot stress this enough. If you build a fence 6 inches over the property line, legally, you are trespassing.
And the remedy isn't just saying, oops.
No, the remedy is tearing it down and moving it. It's expensive and embarrassing. Get a current survey. Think of it as an insurance policy against a neighbor dispute.
Step 3 involves another phone call, 811.
Call before you dig. It's federal law. You cannot break ground until the utilities have marked the gas, electric, and water lines. It usually takes 2 or 3 days.
And it's free, right?
It's free.
Yeah.
Hitting a gas line is not free. It's incredibly dangerous and expensive. Just make the call.
And then the neighbor notification.
Yeah. This is more strategic. Even if your town doesn't require a signature, getting your neighbor to sign off on the plans can speed things up. It signals to the zoning officer that there isn't going to be a fight.
That's a great tip. Now, what about timing? When should people submit this paperwork?
Not in April.
Why not April? That's prime fence season.
Because that's when everyone else is submitting. The zoning offices get totally bogged down. The strategy is to submit in late fall or winter.
Off peak.
Exactly. The offices are quieter. You'll likely get a faster review. You can get your permit approved, have it in hand, and be ready to schedule the contractor the moment the ground thaws.
So winter's for paperwork, spring is for digging.
Precisely. And remember, and this is a crucial detail, you cannot start digging the day you submit the application.
Oh, right. The waiting game.
You must wait for the physical, signed permit, and you must wait for the utility markout. If the town drives by and sees post holes before the permit is issued, they can slap you with a cease and desist order.
And then you're really in for a delay.
Then you're in the penalty box. And that takes a lot longer to get out of.
So let's zoom out. What does this all mean? We started this deep dive thinking about wood and vinyl, but we've ended up talking about so much more.
We have. It really shows that a fence is never just a fence. It's a physical manifestation of where your rights intersect with your community.
It's a balancing act. We've got the state code that seems lenient but is actually a trap. We've got the geology of the frost line dictating how we build. We've got environmental protections for wetlands.
And we've got the social contract, the spite fence laws, the safety triangles. It's all this complex web design to let us live close to each other without driving each other crazy or, getting hurt.
It's basically civilization in a nutshell, right in your backyard.
It really is. It's about understanding that your property is part of a larger system.
So the next time you see a fence, maybe give it a little nod of respect. It went through a lot of paperwork to get there.
It certainly did.
Before we go, I want to leave you with a thought to mull over. We talked about spite fences and the law's attempt to stop them. But think about this. At what point does a property right become a weapon? We have laws to stop fences built out of malice, but how do you prove malice? Is it the height, the color, or is it just the look on your neighbor's face? It makes you wonder how much of our legal system is just trying to legislate the golden rule, and how often it fails.
That is a fascinating question to end on.
That's it for this deep dive into Connecticut fences. Good luck with your projects, and remember, call 811 before you dig.
Stay safe out there.